Chris asked me to talk a little bit about the AIM project that we're involved in with BLM. And I added sort of Sarah and Nelson here because they're sort of my two main partners in crime on the AIM project. But most people have been sort of engaged in this in one form or another. Erica and Justin and Darren, lots of people sort of contribute to this thing that eats our lunch here at the Jornada. And so this is a cooperative project between the Jornada and the BLM to really look at how do we improve monitoring activities within the Bureau of Land Management to get like really actionable information. So I wanted to give a little bit of kind of sort of background of AIM and how it came about and why we got to where we are. 2004, Office of Management and Budget did a programmatic review of BLM's monitoring activities. And apparently at the time, BLM was coding something crazy like $100 million a year to monitoring activities. And so OMB asked the question, well, where's the beef, right? What can you show us for $100 million a year? What can you tell us about the condition and trend of BLM renewable resources? And the answer was, we'll have to get back to you on that. And needless to say, OMB wasn't really impressed with that idea or that answer. And so they basically said, hey, you've got 5 years to get your act together and come back to us with a plan for how you're going to do monitoring within the agency, or you're going to lose the $100 million a year that you're coding to monitoring. And so that was sort of the genesis of the sort of AIM project in BLM. They convened a series of working groups. There was a national working group. I think there was even a regional one, and then there was a local working group. The local one was the only one that really seemed to produce anything of real interest or value. And this is just sort of a snippet from that report, and they're saying, yeah, well, this isn't really surprising. BLM monitoring has sort of evolved as a response to lots of different questions and lots of different needs. And I think this is sort of the most important part down here, that these activities were not designed to answer landscape level questions that are currently being asked. And so they're basically saying, yeah, it's not a surprise that we can't actually report on these data because we've been so focused on land use specific management questions for so long that they've never taken a step back to look at broader issues. And so about this time, so that was sort of 2007 when the local reporting group report went out, and about that time, maybe a little earlier, is when the Jornada became involved in sort of this AIM, what would become then the AIM program within the BLM. We put together a sort of a initial report describing the AIM strategy that came out in 2011. And so the goal of AIM is to report on stats and trends of BLM rangelands at multiple scales, effectiveness of management actions, and information necessary to implement adaptive management. Okay, so that's kind of what we're after. And then there are sort of kind of 5 basic principles, I guess we call them the core tenets of AIM, right? And so the first of these, and so let me step back for a second. Like, why is the Jornada involved in this? Well, the Jornada is involved in this because we have a long record and sort of tradition of rigor and innovation when it comes to monitoring and assessment activities. A lot of the sort of techniques, current state-of-the-art techniques for monitoring, were either developed here or sort of refined and polished and really promoted here. And so the BLM sort of came to us to ask for our help in this. Now, we're more than a gun for hire. We operate through a cooperative agreement with BLM. So we are cooperators with BLM, and we were instrumental in sort of developing the AIM monitoring strategy, and we're sort of up to our eyeballs in actually helping them implement this strategy throughout different levels of the agency. So the 5 sort of core tenets or principles of AIM. First is core indicators and methods. Second is, we call it scalable sample design. That's basically code word for saying it should have, some sort of probability-based sample design. Third is an integration with remote sensing. Fourth is electronic data capture and management. And then fifth is structured implementation, which again is just code word for being thoughtful about how you're doing it, and then actually having a plan for how you're going to use those monitoring data that you collect. So I just wanted to give a few examples of sort of the kinds of things that we're involved in with each of those tenets here. So core indicators and methods, this was one of the first things that we sort of worked with BLM and the AIM program on doing, figuring out what is it that you're actually going to monitor, and then how are you actually going to measure those things in the field, okay? The idea of core methods is that if you're going to go out in the field, here's a minimum set of things that you should be looking at and collecting. And if you're out there, you should always collect any additional information that you need to be useful for management, and that's a supplemental indicator, okay? So the core indicators are bare ground, veg composition, plant species and management concern, non-native invasives, vegetation height and structure, canopy gap, soil aggregate stability. That's the short list. We sort of do these, measure these indicators using line point intercept, vegetation height method, canopy gap, soil stability. Those are sort of the four main methods. Oh, there's a plot level species inventory that we do as well. And all of these now have been codified in the new edition of the monitoring manual. Volume 1 is done. I actually have 1,000 copies of it sitting in my office right now. Volume 2 is close to being done. We hope that'll be out sometime this year. I think it's important, this is another sort of idea that we brought to AIM from the Jornada, that we sort of separate these ideas of indicators and methods. These things are commonly sort of tied too closely together and baked into a monitoring program, and what it does is it ties your monitoring to a specific type of measurement that you're making, and it doesn't give you the flexibility to evolve and adapt over time. And so I fully expect over the years that some or maybe even all of these techniques could be accomplished through other, better, more accurate, easier to do, more quantitative methods, right? And when those methods are developed and they're vetted and we're confident in them, then we should quit doing what we're doing now and then start doing these new techniques, okay? And that's the reason of separating, making the distinction between indicators and methods. A big focus that we put on AIM, and a big sort of activity that the Jornada is engaged in right now, is providing training to the BLM in sort of two arenas. One is sort of the core methods training, and so we actually had about 30 people from BLM here last week to participate in a field methods training. We'd done a training the week before in Tucson. We have 7 more trainings that we're doing this year across the West and up in Alaska. So it's everything from basic sort of soils characterization, ecological site identification, to running the field methods and testing and calibrating on that. And then in the fall of the year, we run a series of what we call implementation workshops, and these are geared toward the program staff in the BLM. How do you actually design and set up and do the care and feeding for a monitoring program? Okay, so this is more of the actual, how are you going to do the measurements on the ground, and this is more of the, okay, the larger issues. How do you actually put a program together that gets you information that you need? Electronic data capture and storage, and this is a really cool example of where we've been able to take an existing effort in the Jornada through DEMA and through a little bit of retooling and a lot of, I think, sort of aggressive marketing, have been able to sort of get that instituted within the BLM as the standard for how they're collecting and storing their data. And then we were able to help them develop their enterprise monitoring database, which they called Terrestrial. So this is an idea, I think, of how a Jornada product and some of the good thinking that's gone on here has sort of evolved and contributed, I think, in a positive way to data management and data availability within the BLM. And the really cool thing with this too now, so all of the data that are in the Terrestrial system are now open, publicly available data. The BLM director, Neil Cornsey, signed an instructional memorandum earlier this week making the AIM data public and available. So that's totally cool. One of the other sort of things that we're deeply involved in at the Jornada is how do we actually use monitoring data? How do we take data that once we've collected it and then translate it into information that can actually be used in making a management decision? So for a reporting unit, and this is sort of the topic du jour, which is greater sage-grouse conservation, which is actually funding a lot of this sort of development of monitoring in the BLM. So for greater sage-grouse, within a sort of given administrative unit, like a field office, okay, well, what proportion of that field office is within sustainable habitat or suitable habitat for that species? And this is all just a product of a sampling design that we put together that actually addresses multiple objectives. It wasn't designed solely to inform on sage-grouse habitat. Okay, the remote sensing side, this is more of the actual researchy aspects of what we do. BLM is largely struggling to figure out how to operationalize remote sensing within the monitoring context in BLM. We have a lot of nifty examples of how you could use remote sensing to do that, but we don't have a lot of actual products that are being sort of generated and then used on a routine basis. And so some of the things that we do here through work with Jeff Gillen on the super high res aerial photography stuff, or with John Maynard and looking at more of the landscape scale hypertemporal aspects of remote sensing, is how do we kind of create efficiencies in the monitoring process, and then how do we generate products that can easily fit within this monitoring strategy that BLM has designed with AIM. Okay, so almost done here. So where are we at right now with AIM? So AIM exists at a number of different levels. The decision was made early on to take sort of at the same time a top-down and a bottom-up approach to monitoring. So for the top-down, we helped sort of BLM kind of arrange this sort of marriage between BLM and NRCS to extend the National Resources Inventory sampling, which is done on private and non-federal lands in the U.S., to extend that onto BLM lands. That started in 2011. And once it's done and fully fleshed out, will be a network of about 10,000 monitoring points across BLM lands in the West. At the same time, we have local implementations of AIM monitoring, and these are typically done at either a project scale or a field office scale, and they're geared towards specific management questions that they have. And so examples of this, White River field office in Colorado. Actually, each district in Nevada has local implementations. There's a project in Taos, right? And so all of these are done to the same sort of standards, the same sample design or consistent sample designs, so that the data can all be sort of smashed together and rolled up or rolled down as we need to. So in 2016, we will now have about 40 active local projects at the same time that this sort of national level monitoring is going on. We have sort of core indicators and methods developed for both terrestrial and aquatic environments. So at this point right now, there are over 12,000 terrestrial sample points that have been visited, described on BLM lands, and that are available to us. And so we're looking for opportunities now for okay, how do we start to mine information out of these data sets? So I just wanted to end with a little bit of poetry from one of my favorite modern poets, and we've focused so long on sort of monitoring for sort of these known unknowns, right? And what are the impacts of grazing, or what are the impacts of a treatment or a restoration activity, right? But stuff is changing so fast with climate change, with increasing land uses on public lands in the western U.S. that we need to move to a sort of a monitoring framework that allows us to start to deal with the unknown unknowns as they come up, right? As things become known to us or become issues, we need to have data sets that are available to us that can begin to inform on these things to allow us to maybe get ahead of some of these sort of fire drills that we have. So that's it. That's AIM.